Very special good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest, presented by Greenlight Ventures. And we were scheduled to have Trey West on the program today. I don't know that he's going to make it. There's a big power outage, a giant storm in the Seattle area where he hails from. And even though he's been making money consistently for us here on the program, he has been unable to make the connection so far. So hopefully we'll have his insight into a couple of bets, because I'm thinking about doing something that is absolutely, from a degenerate standpoint, you would have to say, I don't know if you want to use a word like suicidal, because that's not politically correct anymore, and for good, valid reasons, but certainly along the lines of a massive amount of self-sabotage. But we do have some headlines to explore here on the program, and then I'll get into the insanity of this bet that I've been mulling over making. Almost went ahead and pulled the trigger on it yesterday, and then thought, this defies every gambling credo. We were talking about it a little bit yesterday on the program with Scotty M, that I've ever subscribed to in my life. And maybe you fell victim to that also, because there are a couple of things in play here. There's an old adage at the racetrack, and this came from what I thought to be a very astute and sharp handicapper. And this guy was disciplined also. He wasn't one of these guys that was victimized by the temptation to go screen to screen when you're in a simulcasting place. And you just can't wait for the next post time. This guy would bet 2-3 races a day. I mean, it was real old school type of shit. And he was very successful with it. And he always said, never bet on a horse to do something that it hasn't done before in its lifetime successfully the first time. Never bet on a horse to do something that it hasn't done before. In other words, if you're not a horse racing fan, horses race at various distances and different conditions. But he would essentially say, hey, if you're betting on a horse that is a sprinter, running 3/4 of a mile races, 6 furlongs as the parlance would be, don't bet on that horse to win going a longer distance or around 2 turns for the first time. Because oftentimes you need to see one, and that horse needs that experience before it's ever going to be able to measure up to the potential that it had shown in these previous races. Now, if he happens to win by 10 lengths and sails, then you sat one out, but you're going to be much more in favor in terms of your financial wherewithal if you pass on those races, as opposed to the number of times that you get absolutely buried, that it becomes the virtual clubbing of seals for your bankroll. So that's a good one. And that applies, I believe, to what's going on in the college football playoffs. So we'll get to that. And also, I mean, over the years, and I was doing sports talk radio in the South Florida area, and even on some national basis as well. I can't tell you how many times I took calls from people saying, hey, you know what? I'll never watch another NFL game again. And I'm going to start a movement. I want everybody to stop watching whatever team it happened to be until they change the coach. So this fan boycott stuff never really amounted to much of anything. And you would hear people say, I'll never pay another ticket to see the Toronto Blue Jays play again or whatever, the Tampa Bay Rays. And of course, they were getting their same normal number of attendance figures accomplished night after night, because these things, they never work, the fan boycott. But there is a movement now afoot. I don't know if it's going to, really gather enough momentum to actually gain some substance. But talking about how, and it amazes me that people would bet on the outcome of professional wrestling matches. And yet, when you look at the postscript on this Jake Paul Tyson fight, 4 times the amount of money was bet on this particular matchup. I don't even know if you want to call it a fight. It should have been classified as an exhibition. And then if you want to bet on it, you're certainly playing at your own risk. But you're not figuring that there's some kind of fix that is in. But as you re-examine some of the circumstances surrounding this event, and the fact that the public was duped into betting 4 times the greatest amount of money ever ventured and wagered on any boxing match in history, you really have to wonder what kind of suckers the public, it tends to be. I guess that was in evidence also with yet the latest cabinet assignment of Dr. Mehmet Oz, who was last seen testifying in front of Congress and making alibis for the fact that, well, it's entertainment. I didn't mean to say or imply for 1 second that this stupid fucking pill was going to help everybody lose massive amounts of weight in a healthy fashion. I mean, he's admitting right there that he's a fraud. So now, of course, he's in charge of Medicare and Medicaid. I just hope my benefits hold up. If you're in the black right now in terms of betting, and or if you're in the red and you want to make a wager and try and get your money back in the right direction tonight, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch and play the games as they happen. It's great. I mean, maybe you were wrong about the outcome. You could see it right away. You can make a couple of other wagers. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA action, including the coveted NBA Cup, NHL to entertainment, political props. Maybe you had Dr. Oz to become the head of Medicaid. You'd be making a hell of a score. Head to Bet Online today to get in on all the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right. So here's what's happening. And I was reading an article this morning in the New York Post. I don't know if this was on display elsewhere, probably online somewhere. And they were interviewing the writer was interviewing a lawyer who was talking about the possibility of the evolution of a class action lawsuit over the Tyson-Paul fight. Okay, so what did we witness here? I mean, and think about this. Well, one of the points that was made, which is absolutely true, is that in boxing, unlike other sports, the fighters don't get paid if they don't play. If Tyson and Paul don't step into the ring that night in Arlington, Texas, Jake Paul loses the $40 million payday that he had set up through his own promotional company. He has, I would imagine, a general idea from his business partners. And I mean, how clever is this? Think about it. I mean, they get 70,000 people to fucking turn out at Arlington Stadium. That in and of itself is beyond remarkable. If that was it would be one of the most astounding things that ever happened in sport, or so-called sport, maybe sport as circus. And Mike Tyson makes $20 million. They don't get a dime of that if they don't step into the ring. So even though Tyson, just a couple of months prior, what was being carted off an airplane with some kind of ulcer that was so debilitating, people didn't even know if he was going to make it off the runway there and to whatever hospital he received treatment at. And this only postpones this fight for like a few months. 58 years old. We all got duped into watching the video of Tyson in the gym, and he's pounding the shit out of the guy that was wearing the mitts and had the padding on and making those moves that he used to make where you thought, well, I mean, he's going to get inside of one of these sweeping left or right hands that Jake Paul throws, and he's going to pound him, pop him one time with one of those brilliant uppercuts he used to have, and we're going to turn back the clocks on Father Time, and everybody's going to celebrate because Tyson by knockout had to be, I would think it was the most substantial wager made with all the money that was coming in on Mike Tyson. Now the bookies, were they in on this fix? I don't know. And how this was licensed as an actual fight when they already had cut the rules and marginalized the rules. You're supposed to fight men in boxing, 3-minute rounds. And somehow they get this aberration approved where it's going to be 2-minute rounds. That would have immediately, I'm not sure who is behind the Texas Division of Licensing, but it must be a very reputable organization for them to say, hey, you know what? Just throw everything out the window and we'll still sanction this fucking thing as if it was for real. And what was the purpose of that? Maybe to preserve the wagering action? Is that possible, people? How badly were we fooled by this entire event? So Tyson, who was recently impaled to a hospital bed, comes out at 58 years old. Everybody's thinking, wow, he's as fresh as a daisy, and what a remarkable specimen for his age. He shows his ass to the fans, which was symbolic, I think, of the fact that you were about to get fucked, and gets in there and puts on a dreadful performance. And Jake Paul admits after the fight that he carried Tyson, where there was a lot of money. I'm not sure if it was the most or highest percentage of the wagers. That was on Jake Paul by knockout at plus 125. So he admits that in spite of the fact that he could have blown on Mike Tyson and he would have passed out, that he carried him all the way through until this came to the obvious and widely respected decision that Tyson was no factor in this fight and lost a unanimous decision. Those people got paid off. And I think that might have been plus 140 that the fight would go the distance. So there were a lot of things being contingent on something that was fugazi from the very outset. Does that constitute a grounds for a lawsuit? I don't know. Is somebody going to go ahead and file one and say, hey, I want my money back? I would think somewhere along the line somebody gets a notion that maybe that's the right thing to do. But Forget about it, as they say. This has never worked. I mean, this is also from this same article. And I took a million calls in sports talk radio about guys, as I mentioned it, said they would never watch another NFL game after this official, jobbed them, going back to that Saints-Rams game where people were so horrified by the lack of the pass interference call that they were, I'll never watch another game. I heard that for a long time in the aftermath of that. Of course, people are watching. They're watching in record numbers. You're never going to dissuade people from this. It's essentially, for the most part, free entertainment, although it's heading in another direction. But of the idea of boycotting or starting some kind of lawsuit to try and get your money back if you lost it on the Tyson-Paul fight, the precedent is set nationally that if you sue as a gambler or a fan, you don't have a chance to win. They could have put fucking chance to win in there. No chance, my friends. They generally get thrown out, these lawsuits, because courts have held that the plaintiffs don't have standing to sue. In this particular framework, the promoter of the fight was Jake Paul, and all of a sudden, Tyson gets medically cleared and healthy enough to fight. He looking like a shell of himself, and compared to any of the videos that we saw. Got scammed, everybody. Complete and total scam, and guess what? Can't do anything about it, which is a disaster. All right, couple of other things, and I want you guys to talk me out of making this bet, or you can go ahead and pass judgment any kind of comment line that you see on the show of what kind of lunatic move this happens to be. But we did see the Jets make a move, and they fired Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas at 30-64 in his tenure as a general manager. You were wondering how the hell he kept his job to begin with. He pulls the trigger on what may turn out. I don't know that it's ever going to be the worst trade or even among the worst trades in sports history when he acquires Aaron Rodgers. And in the process of acquiring Rodgers, he swaps a first-round pick in 2023, but gives up his number 13 pick. Gives up a second-round pick in 2023, turned out to be number 42 overall. A sixth-round pick that year as well. A conditional 2024 second-round pick, which remained a second-round pick because Aaron Rodgers played like 3 plays in the season where the conditions were predicated upon, which was that he plays 65% of the snaps. So he ends up doing nothing his first year, and now has everybody. I mean, they're cleaning house. Already fired a coach earlier. A few weeks later, the general manager. People in New York are screaming, well, the only change that's going to be of any significance is if the owner gets let go. That's not happening because every time you shove a Q-tip up your nose, Woody Johnson is enhanced and enriched to the point with Johnson & Johnson that he's going to be able to go out there and try and buy his way out of whatever mistakes he's made. It hasn't worked. And perhaps this is the curse of Mike Tannenbaum that's impacted the New York Jets, where Mike Tannenbaum comes to a franchise as the general manager, and they are not only ruined during his tenure, but they are ruined for the ensuing 20 to 25 years thereafter. Happened with the Jets. They've done nothing since he left there, and they were doing nothing when he was there because he fucking buried them. Happened with the Miami Dolphins. They've done literally nothing, even with the assemblage of all of this high-priced talent that they have. They're crowing that they still have a shot at 4-6 with the Patriots coming to town this week. And yet you're looking at the reality of it. Are they a championship caliber team? Probably not. Well, what was the consistent parallel there? Who was their general manager before Chris Greer took over, who's roundly panned and criticized with a lot of disparaging remarks about the job he's done? Mike Tannenbaum, who now, and it's kind of comical to watch this on TV, where Mike Tannenbaum is an expert on all the moves that other general managers should make, when he personally buried more people than any of your local funeral directors in whatever city you happen to be watching the show from. So it's a curse that is not easy to overcome, and the Jets have been unable to do so. They brought in this Joe Douglas. He had a pretty good reputation. And as I said, I mean, he might have been the orchestrator of one of the worst trades. Could be what? Is it top 50 worst trades of all time? That's still an infamous category to be a part of. But yeah, it's been an absolute disaster. As you look at the New York Jets, the acquisition I mean, it's just Aaron Rodgers has been the ruination of the franchise. They're marching right out the door, raising the price of season tickets, and also trying to address the question of do they bring Aaron Rodgers back for another year? But you could not have suffered a more indignant fate than to see what happened to the New York Jets after they made this whole Aaron Rodgers deal. So people just heads are rolling in the Jets executive offices, and I don't know. It may be a long time before they come up with any kind of solution to return. Now, they actually are involved right now in the longest playoff drought of any team in the National Football League. All right, so here's where I'm coming from with this bet, and you guys tell me if I'm out of my mind or not. I'm looking over the card in the National Football League. It begins tomorrow night. Steelers laying 3.5 to the Cleveland Browns. Browns being quarterbacked right now by Jameis Winston. Winston, for every good thing he does, he usually counters with a couple of really negative things. I kind of root for the kid because it seems like he's made a vital transformation. He's certainly done well enough for himself financially that he should be set for the rest of his life. I saw a piece with him a couple of years ago, and this was a guy that everybody perceived to be a nut job who was being coddled and protected by the people at FSU. There were sexual assault allegations. There was the famous thing where he went to a store and walked out with like 20 pounds of crab legs and figured he out of entitlement, didn't have to pay. They kept looking the other way for this stuff because he was a great college quarterback for the most part. Great college quarterback. Could really throw the rock, was electrifying. Was capable of making plays on the fly. Seemed to have everything but maybe size as a tool to be a very effective professional quarterback. Did have a penchant for making the negative play. And is there ever a timely pick six? Usually not. But he had a little bit of a tendency in that direction. That was exacerbated when he became a pro because obviously you're going to a lousy team as a number one overall pick. And it looked like his career was pretty much of a bust. But it seemed like he might have turned it around, or at least turned around where he was coming from in this piece that I saw. So I started rooting for him. But that being said, is having any kind of compassion for the plight of one Jameis Winston enough to convince you to go ahead and take 3.5 points? They are at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who win games, but by the narrowest of margins. How they're doing this is testament strictly to the coaching expertise of Mike Tomlin. This guy, he should be mentioned in the same breath as Lombardi in NFL history, and that he's never had a losing season with this Pittsburgh Steelers team, and that he's able and capable of doing and beating good teams like he did last week against the Baltimore Ravens, with a team that, I mean, outside of T.J. Watt, how great do they look, the Pittsburgh Steelers? They're grinding out these victories in not exactly the most inspiring of fashion. Old school, hardcore Chuck Noll doing it with defense and an offense that is seemingly pedestrian, except for the occasional Russell Wilson throws these passes. They look like you need to invoke the infield fly rule, and he ends up completing them. They get that guy Mike Williams from the New York Jets, and the first thing he does is catch a touchdown pass 10 yards behind the nearest defender. So there's a little bit of serendipity to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know about this game. It's hard to imagine that the Browns would win straight up, but the point spread, the margin is narrow enough to make you believe that, okay, are they in there with a puncher's chance? This is the kind of thing that the Browns occasionally do, as it was when they upset the Ravens. When the Ravens had won 5 in a row, I believe, and what looked like they were ticketed, I mean, just punch your ticket to the Super Bowl, that they're going to be a part of it, and help our friend out with his $480,000 payoff if the Ravens win the Super Bowl on a $50 5-component parlay. We've talked about that. My buddy Dylan Rossi has a ticket that if the Ravens win the Super Bowl, $50 bet. He had UConn to win the NCAA championship. He had the Celtics to win the NBA championship, the Florida Panthers to win the Stanley Cup. That was the big one that kind of brought the odds up exponentially. He cashes a 4-element parlay for less money, but 90,000 nonetheless. When the Dodgers win the World Series, Ravens win the Super Bowl, all in the same ticket, 480,000 for $50. I told him, I mean, that's the stuff of which legends are made. I don't know what the early buyout is on that, but would you be convinced that the Ravens, they're in there with a shot? It just depends how they roll towards the end of the season. And yet we've seen Lamar Jackson fail in the postseason many times. And recently we've seen him fail in a couple of spots where you would think, geez, that this is the determining factor about whether or not this club is Super Bowl material. But still a little ways to go, 6 weeks to go in the NFL season, so much to be decided, and we'll see where they're at towards the end of the year. Certainly going to be rooting for this guy. But all that being said, the Steelers somehow remarkably find ways to win games. Are they due for some kind of bitter, narrow loss? Maybe. So I'm going to leave them out of the equation here. And this has become a popular bet where people are combining all chalk multi-team parlays, so 7, 8, 9 team parlays, and taking whatever the odds turn out to be, even though you're laying a price in every game. But they're venturing small amounts of money to win, something that would be of relative significance, especially for the amount wagered. And you're getting somewhere along the lines. I don't know. With 8 teams, would you get 20 to 1 on an all money line chalk parlay? Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to check this out. I'm going to send this bet in today, though. There's no way I see the Giants with Tommy Cutlets at cornerback beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers haven't been bad this year. The Buccaneers are favored by 5.5. They're on the road against the Giants. The Giants team in total disarray. They not only bench Daniel Jones, they're eating his salary. And then on top of that, they bypass Drew Lock and put Tommy Cutlets, who was a great story. I mean, a brilliant story there for a brief period of time. Great story last year when he won those couple of ball games, and you thought, my God, the guy was essentially like drinking ragu spaghetti sauce out of a jar, and the next thing you know, he's endorsing Rayo's in New York City. Rags to riches type of story. But now he's back as the starting quarterback. I don't see the Buccaneers losing there. But the Vikings going against the Bears. The Bears have been a hard luck team in some ways, especially last week when Santos misses that potential game-winning field goal, and they go down after a hard-fought battle against the Green Bay Packers. Bears are at home. Vikings seem to be coming back to the pack a little bit. They've been winning, but not overwhelmingly impressively. This could be the trap game there, but I was going to go ahead and throw the Vikings in. So you didn't have the Buccaneers straight up, Vikings straight up. Lions, I believe, will annihilate the Indianapolis Colts. They've been an unstoppable force, and they're not afraid to run up the score. So I was looking at that one. Dolphins should beat the Patriots, handle them. Dolphins are coming back a little bit from the dead with Tua Tagovailoa looking razor sharp. Aren't putting up enormous numbers of points. Defense is suspect, but I don't think the Patriots are good enough to come to Miami and beat them. You have the Commanders are 10-point favorites over the Cowboys. I would bet against the Cowboys every week. So if you're going to give me the Commanders at home straight up over an inept Cowboy team, and as we've been talking about here on the show, what is more, invigorating? What is more inspiring than watching the Cowboys in the process of losing and getting hammered and embarrassed, and then seeing the shots of Jerry Jones up there in the booth? So I don't see the Cowboys beating the Commanders, especially going on the road. Chiefs are big favorites over the Panthers. You would have to imagine that the Chiefs win that game straight up. Texans, huge favorites over an inept Titans team, and I'm going to throw them in there. And the Broncos are favored by 5.5 over a Raiders team that is in complete disarray as well. They gave it a little bit of an effort and still managed to lose to the point spread last week to the Dolphins. Don't appear to be particularly effective. Gardner and Minshew, not exactly Johnny Unitas back there at quarterback. So I'm thinking straight up, I'm in pretty good shape. So that would be an 8-team parlay. Bucks, Vikings, Lions, Dolphins, Commanders, Chiefs, Texans, Broncos. With the only real potential trap and trip-up games, I think, maybe being the Bears against the Vikings with the Vikings on the road. And possibly, I can't see the Giants beating the Buccaneers. So maybe you leave that one out, go for the 7-game ticket, maybe bet both of them, 7 and 8 games. But I'm tempted to do that. That's lunacy, isn't it, people? I mean, you have to be flat out of your mind to do something along those lines. It's almost like I said, like betting a setup, betting pro wrestling, or betting the fight there with Tyson and Paul. Where I mean, who gave Tyson medical clearance to get in the ring a couple of months after he had suffered this? I mean, a devastating blow from I guess apparently he was diagnosed as some kind of ulcer, but just took the guy out. They thought he had a stroke right there on the plane. There used to be a ring physician out in Los Angeles when I was covering boxing at the Olympic Auditorium. His name was Dr. Bernhard Schwartz. The guy was like 97 years old. He literally, this is a really old reference, but he looked like the actor Sam Jaffe in the old Ben Casey series. And you thought, wow, this guy is actually licensed to practice medicine in the state of California. Seemed odd. And the truth was, and the fighters would tell you this, that he wouldn't just like look in your eye and take the little flashlight to see if you could continue fighting. He literally like he would take your pulse, and if you had even the slightest sense of a pulse, he'd say, "Yeah, it's good to go. One more round." It was either him or Dr. Flippo Mansky. I don't know if you remember this guy. He was a ring physician out in Las Vegas forever. Fighter would have like two giant gashes on his face. He would look like Terry Sawchuk did when he was playing goal without a mask in the NHL many years ago. Take a look. Just Google Terry Sawchuk. Look at this man's face, and you can see the treachery of being a hockey goalie in the early ages and stages of the NHL, or even, I guess, they had been around for a long time, and they hadn't figured out to put something on the fucking goalie's face to protect him. I mean, it was sliced up like he was carved up in a horror movie. And Homansky, I mean, he would look at a guy in a corner and he's bleeding from every pore, and he would, yeah, one more round, it'd be okay. But those are the only type of medical doctors. Maybe Mehmet Oz would have sent Tyson into the ring that actually would have let this thing go on. And to think, I mean, that this was an event with a staggering amount of money bet on it. It makes you lose a little bit of your faith in the betting public. So, and here I am. I'm telling you this as I'm recommending you bet an 8-team all chalk NFL parlay coming up over the weekend. All right, we apologize for not being able to bring you Troy West today. Power outage in Seattle. We hope they get that restored. Troy's been doing very well for us. I'll try and get in touch with him, get his picks for you, because he's been a consistent 2-1 performer here in the 3 games he gives out on the show. So we're very very happy about that, and I've been able to make you guys some money on these Wednesdays with the handicapping expertise of the great Troy West. I'll try and come up with his picks tomorrow. Mike Jones will join us on the show tomorrow. If the power stays up and afloat here in South Florida, that's always risky. One drop of rain is enough to take the power grid off the map here in our state. So I can empathize with what happened with Troy on the show today. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. I hope you did make a score on the Tyson-Paul fight and are not going to be among the many who futilely are thinking about and contemplating having a class action suit. Who would you sue? You would sue the people that licensed this and sanctioned it as a fight so it could become a betting event? They wouldn't let you bet it in New York. Because they said, hey, as soon as they started fucking with the format there and had the 2-minute rounds, whoosh, that makes it an exhibition, which rightfully should have been the status of it, according to the Texas Department of Licensing. But I would imagine, I don't know, did Jake Paul have to deliver a large attaché full of cash to those guys to have that sanction as a fight? And I would imagine, too, that he might have had substantial wagers placed around the country, knowing that there was no way that Mike Tyson was going to be able to do anything to him, especially after having a medical emergency occur just a few months prior. I will see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Jeff DeForrest for Greenlight Ventures, Bet Online, the people that know filter. See you next time on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.